Hello, and welcome to Two Crones and a Microphone. I am Linda.
And I am Betty.
I'm Sally.
And I'm Lupo.
Welcome, Lupo. We're so glad you're here with us today. As cultural midwives, our podcast offers guidance and teachings to those seeking wisdom from us as experienced crones. We utilize effective methods to connect with ourselves and our surroundings, and we embrace spirituality as a source of resilience and empowerment.
We ask you to visit us on our website, twocronesandamicrophone.com, for additional information and blogs done by our crone Sally on our various topics. Soon we will have a YouTube channel, Two Crones and a Microphone, and please look for the two owls. There are many crones on YouTube these days, but you want two crones and a microphone. We'd like to thank our sponsors, the Minerva Educational Wellness Treatment Center, LLC. You can access that at minervaed.com and look especially for Sally's tapping class. And Franny's photography. Franny is our amazing producer, so we ask you to check her out also.
In 2024, as part of our Restore and Replenish series, we will continue to implement a number of updates to Two Crones and a Microphone. We're always growing and changing, and stay tuned so that you can see what we're up to next. We're really happy to have launched our interview series and to have Lupo with us here today. Remember to join our mailing list, and to do that, you would go to our website, twocronesandamicrophone.com, to join. And remember, you should see those two owls.
Today, as part of our Interview with the Crones series, we are delighted to speak with Lupo Passero, ritual herbalist, green witch, wayfinder, and educator, and in the queen phase of her life. Lupo is founder of Twin Star Herbal Education and Twin Star Travel. Based in both Asheville, North Carolina and New Milford, Connecticut, along with a tremendous in-person and online teaching platform, which can be found at Twin Star Tribe, TWINSTARTRIBE.com, twinstartribe.com. It's my pleasure to introduce Lupo. Lupo, we've known each other for years now, and it's such a pleasure to have you here. You know I respect your wisdom and knowledge and humor and all the good things. And so you're my main herbal teacher, you're a mentor for many years, and a dear, dear sister friend. And I seem to recall I first met you over 12 years ago now in your Backyard Herbalism series, which was in New Milford, Connecticut, where you invited us into your herbal garden that was gorgeous. And we got to learn hands-on about the various herbs. And you immediately captured my attention because you spoke about building a personal relationship with those herbs. And that approach aligned so well with what we learned from Oshana, another teacher of mine. So, and in fact, of three of us. And so, how did you get started in what you're doing?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for having me. It's always
Yes.
a pleasure to work with you, Linda, and I do consider you a dear friend and a sister on the path. And Betty and Sally, I really appreciate you having me today. How did I get started? I think the original question that we spoke about was how did I get started on my spiritual path?
Yes.
And the reason I want to emphasize that is because most of the time people ask me how I got started on my herbal path. But the real truth is I got started on the spiritual path first. So I really appreciated you mentioning that. I grew up in the woods in Newtown, Connecticut. I was the daughter of Italian and Irish immigrants, granddaughter, I should say. And I grew up in the woods and I grew up with the plants and I was always making little rituals and ceremonies, and had all the neighborhood kids in the backyard looking for fairies with me and playing with the moss. And so I think I just fell in love with nature, and I really fell deeply in love with the plants without knowing that the plants were what like held me and like supported me through somewhat turbulent times in my youth. And so that's where my spiritual path began. And then I just kept returning to the plants and returning to the plants. And then eventually I started studying herbal medicine.
Hmm, that's great. And where did you study herbal medicine?
In Asheville, North Carolina. I moved here the day after I graduated high school and also the day after I turned 18. And
Wow.
I just fell in love with the biodiversity here and all of the plants. And I started to learn about a few of them. And then next thing you know, I wanted to know about all of them.
And at what point in time did you know that you could establish relationship with the plants? Because was it a gradual thing? It's just so interesting because that is one of my main connections is that you have such an understanding of the energetics and the wisdom in our plant healers and teachers.
Yeah, I think the first time I ever really recognized that the plants were working with me and speaking through me, I was here in Asheville. I started teaching at a very young age, and I had dug up this black cohosh root on the side of this mountain with plans to put it back in. And I was holding it up in front of me so all of the students with me could see the entire plant, roots, leaves, and then these huge, beautiful raceme flowers above. And I started telling the story of the plant from what I knew, Latin name, where it came from, that it was indigenous to this beautiful landscape. And then these other parts just started coming through about its shape and its form and its color and its light. And I remember afterwards tucking it back into the earth and walking off with my students and thinking, wait a minute, I don't even know where half of that just came from.
Yes.
It was the first time I was ever really like, oh wow, this is deeper than just learning the name of plants and
Yeah.
knowing what attributes they have.
Oh, that's such a beautiful story. Thank you. And how has that ability progressed, and how do you work with that when you are an educator? Because you're really profoundly wonderful at that, at helping all of us to understand that connection.
Thank you, Linda. I think that for me, there was a point in time where I was in my mid-20s and I was teaching herbalism and I had two young children. And this medicine, like this intuitive knowledge was kind of coming through. And I thought to myself, like, well, who am I to know any of this? And I didn't have a full sense of myself yet. I was still very young. Um, and I didn't fully trust my intuition. I was struggling with that. I was struggling with what was showing up and what I had to know as facts. And I was walking down the beach by myself, which was a rare occurrence. And I asked Spirit, I said, all right, I will trust this. I will trust this knowledge. I will follow this path, but I need a sign. And I've done that before. I'm sure we've all done that before. I need a sign. And the signs can be anything. A butterfly flits by.
Yeah.
Well, right at that exact moment, this ancient shell, conch shell, rolled up onto my feet. And it's ancient. It had been in the ocean for who knows how long.
Wonderful.
I looked down and I thought to myself, oh, shoot, what did I just do? Because I made a contract. I asked Spirit for
Yes.
a sign.
Yes.
It's beautiful. I mean, it's in the other room. It's sat on my altar for the last, 20 plus years. And
Yeah.
I thought, okay, well, okay. And then every time I wanted to doubt myself or doubt what I heard or doubt what I understood about the plants without knowing who actually taught me it, or doubted hearing from the plants, like through my heart, every time I went back to that moment of saying that I promised Spirit that I would show up and that I would listen and that I would trust myself. So I really believe
Mhm.
that the biggest part of building relationships with plants is trusting your own intuition first and making that agreement with yourself that you'll allow whatever comes up to come up without pushing it away. It doesn't mean you have to act on it or do anything with the information, but just to receive it and acknowledge it. And so that for me is what really kept me on the path of being in this very spiritual relationship with plants.
That is just gorgeous. Thank you. I don't think I'd ever heard that story before, so I really appreciate hearing it.
Thanks for letting me share it. Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
really special, it was really special, and that's what kept me there. So here I am, plants 20 years later.
And that actually falls in line with what Oshana always taught us, about watching for sign, because they're all around us,
Exactly.
and the other thing she would say is, be careful what you ask for. And there you go, Lupo.
Yes, I do remember in that moment thinking, oh no.
Yep.
Well, that contract is sealed. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. Be careful what you ask for and be ready to have your prayers or your big asks answered.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I think one of the things that strikes me is you said you were very young when this happened, and I think that your ability to listen to your intuition and to embrace what happened and recognize it for what it was is actually incredible. Because I think oftentimes people wait till they're much older to finally sort of slip into ourselves and realize that if we pay attention to our intuition and we honor what comes to us as what it is and not just something we're making up or creating, and to have that come so young and to embrace that is just incredible.
Yeah, I agree,
Agree.
Sally. There was no way out of that. Once I was in it, I was in it. And it really has served me well because as a herbal practitioner and an educator, and I take people around the world on trips, and I've owned an apothecary for 8 years. All of those things required so much intuition or really being able to trust myself and trust where I was being led or where I was leading other people, or when we're out in the woods or we're in Italy or wherever we are, being like, I think we need to go down this trail and just trusting that. And it takes some discerning, and when I was young, I really struggled with it a lot, but you're right. I think if all of us were taught to really trust our intuition at a young age, we would be in a very different landscape right now.
I completely agree. And Lupo, this harks back to one of the ways we introduced you as a wayfinder. I think you've been very creative and very also logical, but very intuitive and creative in the way that you've built accessibility through the school, through the trips, through the apothecary when that was part of your remit. It's influenced and helped so many people. And so I just want to say, Wayfinder, there we are. It may not follow the straight and narrow path, and it may not follow a known path because it needs to be created whole in the moment and then followed.
Yes, I agree. And I'll also say that it's not an easy path to follow, but
No.
being in love with the plants and trusting the plants. So I'm oftentimes will trust the plants more than I trust myself, or seeing them as these like sentient beings
Mhm.
that also have this innate wisdom. I didn't feel like I was navigating this terrain alone.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, here's a ringer question. Today, what's your favorite herb that you'd
Oh my
like to talk about?
already talked about my favorite herb, and anyone that knows me well knows that black cohosh is one of
Yes.
my favorite plants. She's indigenous here to the East Coast, and I teach and talk about her all the time and how special she is. I don't know if I've ever been on a podcast where she doesn't come up. She's my queen. I think of her as the dark goddess and having this energy to like transmute darkness into light. So she's my beloved. Like I did a hand fasting ceremony with her about,
Mm.
I don't probably shortly after, like about 20 years ago, and that kind of sealed that deal too. So I always say she's my only successful marriage. And I have to mention her. But my favorite plant right now that's out, like here in Appalachia, is mimosa. And Linda, I know you and I have spent some time together with mimosa.
Yes, in France. That was such a memorable time. We were picking these gorgeous pink and white blossoms off a mimosa tree. Lupo, you were standing up on top of the van, I think, in order to get those.
Yeah, I was. And they're in full bloom and they're this beautiful pink puff flower that just
Mm.
smells like what pink should smell like. Sweet and fragrant, and it's the bark was traditionally used to like relax the nervous system and to just bring us
Mm.
back into that parasympathetic state.
Yeah.
It looks like that. It just looks like joy and relaxation, and it smells divine. And that's what's blooming everywhere right now where I am. So
Oh,
usually my second favorite plant or whatever, third or fourth runner-up is at the time,
hmm.
it's really based upon what's blooming around me.
Sure, sure. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Oh,
So
well,
I have a question. When you decided to become an herbalist, how did your family react to this? I could see it on your face.
Yeah, so I have a very supportive family. I will say that in a lot of ways. I love my family dearly. I'm so incredibly blessed to have the family that I have. And this was not a traditional path, and I come from a very traditional family. So I will say that when I first set on the path, I was supported, but I was really highly encouraged to finish college instead of going to herb school.
mhm.
And it was, how are you going to make a living? How are you going to do this? How are you going to pay your way? How are you going to pay your bills? And then, but whatever, I just kept doing what I was doing. And I was definitely the child that was told to do one thing and I would do the other. So that didn't really work out so well. I mean, it did in the long run. And then, like, about 10 years ago or 12 years ago, when I really started gaining some momentum in what I was doing, Dr. Oz came out, Oprah started talking. All of a sudden, everybody started talking about plants. And now we see it all the time, like we all over
Mhm.
TikTok, all over Instagram. Like
Mhm.
there's just so many herbalists out there. But in the late 90s when I started, there wasn't. But it became its natural products, which I also worked in the natural products industry for many years. These things
Mhm.
started to be just come more and more popular. And I think that really helped. And it put some validity behind it.
Yes.
And I was able to make my living as an herbalist, and I train people to be herbalists, and they go on to make their living as herbalists. And
Yes.
yeah, so it wasn't a traditional path, but in the long run, it worked out really well. And I feel very supported and blessed to have the family that I have.
Great question. Thank you. And then, herbalism is gaining credibility. And um, a little bit about herbalism. What's the backstory?
Well, since you're asking me, I will tell you that my focus as a trained herbalist is that I focus on the art, the science, and the spirit of herbalism.
Nice.
And I find that the spirit is getting diluted, and that herbal medicine oftentimes people try to fit it in the box of Western medicine, and it doesn't fit in that box.
Yeah.
And Western medicine is so important and life-saving and amazing in its own
Yes.
way. One of the things that we've really lost in Western medicine is our ability to remember that prayer and ritual and ceremony and gratitude were all part of the healing process. So
Mhm.
when we try to take herbalism and fit it into a box, which is removed the main, in my opinion, the most important part, which is the spirit of the plants, it no longer works. And
Mhm.
so that's been an interesting like dance to watch. And
Yeah.
I do understand why herbalists work so hard to prove the validity of plants through a Western lens, because that is what we've all been trained, how we've all been trained to see. But the real truth is, if we don't talk about the magic, the wonder, the awe, the beauty, the healing that comes just from sitting with a plant, let alone ingesting its beautiful constituents that are medicine for us, then we have lost our way. So I spend a lot of time, especially in the last 10 years, really trying to refocus my efforts as an educator on people building right relationship with plants and
Mhm,
right relationship with themselves,
mhm.
and really trusting in this medicine that kept us all on the planet for the last 10,000 years, with our entire beings, and knowing that we're part of that. We're part of that fabric. It was just torn for just a minute. So it's a lot of repair work right now and a lot of remembering. You and I talked a lot
Yes,
about the,
yes,
yeah,
yeah. Instead of dismembering, remembering the pieces and bringing them back together, knitting them back together. Thank you, Lupo. That was
Yeah.
very eloquent. I really appreciate it.
yeah,
And,
of
you know,
course.
as a nurse, many of our drugs today, our pharmaceuticals, come from plants. Their
Yes.
origin was from plants. And unfortunately, what the pharmaceutical companies did was they took the pieces of the plants, you know, the chemistry of the plant, and turned it into something that's lifeless, you know,
Right.
and the unfortunate part is that people don't realize this. They just take the pill, go on their way, you know, and the other part of that is they're so used to doing that that they don't want to take the time to brew a tea, make a poultice. You know, there's so much you can do, but it takes time and you have to wait for it to work. A lot of things do not work instantly because they have to work with the body. And this is my opinion. This is what I see. And I don't know how you feel about that, Lupo. Am I on track or, you know?
Yeah, well, we've been trained again through that lens to like,
Yeah,
here, take this pill, here, pop this thing, here, take
yeah.
this thing quickly and you'll be all set. It takes time to heal, but there's so much like it's worth the effort. To make a cup of tea is ritual. If you had a really just stressful day, like just as simple as a stressful day, then you come home and you open up your jars and you're smelling your roses and you're holding and listening to the sound of your milky oats and you're putting some holy basil in there, or even better yet, you went out to your garden and you're picking some lemon balm and grabbing some chamomile and you're putting it in a cup and you're taking the time to heat some water, cover it, let it sit, and then you strain it off and you're holding that warm tea in your hands and you're sipping it. That is all the medicine. That is the ritual. That is the time we took for ourselves to take care of ourselves.
Mhm.
That is the aromas and the aromatic experience and working with nature and color and sight and sound and beauty, let alone the chemical constituents inside that tea that are having a physiological effect on our nervous system. So
Exactly.
that we have to, there was like a whole like slow food movement like 10
Mhm.
years ago or so. It was very popular, and it's like same thing with herbalism and healing. It's like there should be a slower pace. And also herbs can work super quickly. If you get stung by a bee or somebody comes over and they have really bad
Yeah.
allergies, I can set them right in just a few minutes, 10, 15 minutes. If it's a chronic condition, that's something you've dealt with for a long time, that's far more serious than stress or a bee sting, like severe arthritis or autoimmune things, it's going to take longer.
Mhm.
The medicine, that's part of the medicine, is allowing ourselves to slow down and reconnect. And we actually truly heal this way. Like we truly can heal things instead of
Mhm.
popping that pill and basically putting a Band-Aid on it. There's many pills that are very important for keeping everybody alive and well, and I'm not suggesting anyone not take their medicine, but I do suggest integrating a slower approach to our medicine.
I love that approach
Well
because
said.
then we're really listening to what our body has to say too. And that's another piece we've kind of lost track of that we're big on reestablishing here along with you. It's just to listen to our bodies. When we were prepping for this, and by the way, this is only the first of several podcasts we intend to do with you. I just want to say this. We have so much that we need to talk about. It's going to be great. But we were doing a little briefing and you talked about empowerment and how taking charge of your health and healthcare can be so empowering. And herbalism is one way to do this.
Yes, and that's such a huge reward. There's a lot of reward that goes into this,
Yeah.
learning about herbal medicine. I know that for me, a big part of what put me on the path was being a young mother and really wanting to
Mm.
tend to my children with herbal medicine. And
Mhm.
it was very empowering when I could not get my son's ear infections to go away with antibiotics. And I finally chose to use herbs and it worked.
Huh.
And it was such an impact. I was very young then too. It was a very empowered feeling. And to know that we can go outside and gather plants and heal ourselves is a form of massive empowerment. It's also a form of resilience and
Yes.
resistance and reclaiming and remembering. And this is in all of our DNA. Every single person listening has an herbalist in your lineage. There's no way you couldn't. If you go back 200 years ago, pretty much everybody would have been considered an herbalist. There may have been a medicine person in the village that knew more than others, but almost everybody had to be an herbalist up until just a couple of 100 years ago because they had to know which plant stopped bleeding and which one would stave off that cough for their babies. So it's
Mhm.
just about remembering. And then again, Linda, that work is so important, coming back into that empowered place
Yeah.
that we are part of this ecosystem. Human beings are
Yeah.
not separate from the ecosystem. We are a part of it. And using and utilizing plants helps us remember that.
I
Yeah.
love too, as an educator, the fact that you're insistent that everyone can do it, that really you're helping others find their relationship with the plants.
I love that. Betty was talking earlier about some of what we learned from Ocean, which is so in keeping with what you're talking about, Lupo,
Yeah.
and being able to establish that relationship. And part of understanding and harmonizing with the element of earth is to learn about the plants as part of that.
Mm.
I This isn't really a ringer question, but it sort of is. Um, in doing that, for those folks that are listening, I'm wondering if we couldn't, and I'm asking you, but if we couldn't as a group of us come up with some first steps that we can give people so that they also, if they choose to, can set their feet more firmly on this path with just some very beginning basic things that they might do. Um, I don't
Yeah.
know what we all think about that, but I would like
Mhm.
to see us really come up with some direction so people can say, "Oh, I think it started with the podcast that's going to come out in June, where Betty and Linda talk about ways that you can work with the herbs that you're planting." So I don't want to go into that too much, but I'm wondering what else we might come up with for people.
So as you're asking that question, my thought is like, just anyone that's listening that doesn't work with plants yet or doesn't have a relationship with plants, like how would they begin? And my suggestion is like, who catches your attention? Plants are like people, like we're attracted to certain people. We know when we meet certain people, they're going to be our friend or our lover or our forever, whatever. Same thing with plants, like we're attracted to them. So who are you attracted to? And you're walking on your daily walk. Is there something that pops out to you? And then if so, go introduce yourself. You don't have to speak out loud if you don't want to, although there's plenty of us crazy plant people out there talking out loud, but you can just
All the time. Yes, but keep going. Yeah.
so yeah, you can just go and introduce yourself in your mind, put your hand on the tree. Every time we see like something beautiful blooming, look how beautiful that is. That's just like walking up to a person and saying, look how beautiful you are. And so there's a
Yeah.
reflection. And then if you want to take it a step further, you can identify the plant, learn to know what it has been named and learn its Latin name. And if you want to go a step further, you can find out if it has any uses. If you're going to work with it, you should, because there's plenty of plants that are toxic and that we shouldn't go cuddle up to poison ivy. We should probably get an idea of who we're working with. And just do one at a time. Like I always tell my students, they will be the best herbalists if they get to know the plants one at a time.
That's
And
right.
it's just like all of us here, the more time we spend together, the better we get to know one another. It's the same thing with plants. So approach it like you would any relationship with the respect and reverence and curiosity, I think would be a good question. That would be my suggestion.
I love that approach. That's really great. Thank you. Well, unbelievably, we are going to need to wrap up soon. And so it has been such an insane pleasure having you here. Thank you for telling and sharing some of your stories. And it's always a pleasure working with you. But in the meantime, I have a couple things that I want to make sure. So I want to invite you to talk about Twin Star for a minute, because I know that there are classes in both locations, and there's also the whole online resource that I really want to highlight.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. First of all, thank you for allowing me to chat with you. I look forward to part 2.
Yay.
Linda told you all earlier that you can find us at twinstartribe.com. We offer a variety of in-person classes, including backyard herbalism, which Linda started with us 12 years ago in both Connecticut and Asheville, North Carolina. We have I think 7 or 8 different online trainings. So one of which is with Linda, the 12 Pillars of the Goddess, which is a
True.
fantastic program. We have Green Witch programs. We have programs that celebrate the journey through the wheel. And today being the summer solstice, it's a great time to look into that.
Excellent.
And then we also have travel trips where we take people out of the country. We just put our dates on for Costa Rica 2025. We almost always spend each February or March in Costa Rica, and we spend time in lots of different beautiful countries. That's a favorite of mine, is being able to
Yeah.
journey with others and be wayfinders with others.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just have lots coming up, so feel free to reach out. Our handle is Twin Star Tribe on all the things. Instagram, Facebook, and whatnot. And yeah, we'd love to have you join us on anything and be a part of us and what we're doing. So thank you for giving me a moment to share that.
Absolutely. Yes. It's been such a deep process in my own life to be able to attend practically every course and to learn and immerse myself in meeting the plants, in right relationship with them, and also just getting to be in a wonderful community together. You build community so well, Lupo, so thank you.
Thank you.
I think as a wisdom practice, we should ask our listeners to follow Lupo's advice. Listen, walk outside or look at the plants on your windowsill, wherever you can meet them, and listen to find the one that really tinkles their bell for you. You're just like, oh, well, look at that. I've never really quite paid attention to that rosemary quite this way. Let's see, how is it? And smell the leaves and get to know that plant, watch the way it grows, open yourself up to that intuitive place where you can just listen a little bit or intuit. What is that plant about? Where did it grow up? What does it do with us? How can it teach us? So I think that would be a lovely wisdom practice. So thank you very much for that.
I love that. And trust what comes up.
Thank you.
You're reminded of your grandmother or if a friend or a
Thank
color,
you.
or you
Yes.
feel it in your body. Just trust what comes up.
Yeah. What a wonderful way to say that. Go ahead, Sally.
I was going to say, I'm always jumping in and telling people to journal things, but I have to tell you, I do think if you're going to start on this journey and wait as each plant comes up and introduces itself to you, that find some way, whether you record it on your phone or you write it down in some beautiful plant journal, to track that. So as your own learning grows, you have a place to go back to where you started and say, oh, wow, I remember when I felt so silly talking to that pink rose in my front yard. And now it talks to me every time I get in my car to drive down the driveway.
And that's exactly right. Yes. I love it. All right. Well, we appreciate you tuning into our podcast. Kindly spread the word and feel free to reach out to us and to Twin Star Tribe with any questions about the subject. We'd be more than happy to answer them. Please feel free to leave a rating or share this episode with family and friends. Subscribe, please, to our podcast on whatever your podcast provider is. There's usually a little subscribe button there. And then we'd love for you to leave a review on our Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn sites and tell us what's most memorable about this exact episode. We'd love to hear from you. We aim to give you ways to be kind to yourself and others. And again, many thanks to our sponsors. Lupo, we're so glad that you could be here with us. And Betty, do you want to help take us out here? One second. Well, this is interesting.
So I'm going to jump in
Please.
because Betty's muted.
Yes.
This year's podcast, we have the theme to restore and replenish. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Betty.
Okay, now that I'm unmuted, as you know, our podcast is dedicated to sharing techniques with all of you to help you navigate the muddy waters of our time. And boy, have they been really muddy lately. It's incredible. So, be kind to yourself. Take a few minutes each day to make yourself a nice cup of tea. I know I do in the afternoon. I have to. And whatever calls to me, that's the tea that I make. Most of you know Tulsi is one of my big faves, but you'll pick yours. You'll pick yours. And so I want to say, until the next time, I just want to throw one thing in there. I am taking one of Lupo's courses online. It's the basic course, and it's amazing, just amazing. So please, at least take a look at it. And you'll learn so much. I have learned a lot. I really have. So Lupo, from me personally, I say thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty.
Lupo, is there anything else you'd like to say as we wind here?
Excuse me. Sorry, Linda.
It's okay.
I just want to thank you all for doing this work, for holding the space of the badass crone, for inviting in these conversations, for putting your voices and your wisdom practices and your medicine out there, and for being the way showers of how amazing it is to walk this path of beauty. And I'm grateful to walk it with each of you. So thank you.
Thank you, Lupo. Thank you. And for me, everyone, go outside, ground, and go seek a glimmer. Find that beautiful moment because they're all out there all the time. And keep it next to your heart until the next time. Be well.
I love, Lupo, that you said to walk in beauty. So I'm going to add to that and say, remember that we can choose each step we take. We can choose to walk it in beauty with the choices that we make. And of course, remember, all is made beautiful. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you all.